I have with me Mr. Nitin Sukh, the Group Executive Vice President, Yes Institute, Yes Bank. Thank you so much for joining us. The first question would be, why do you think Bangalore was ruled out of the 98 cities?
Look, every city must, at the end of the day, have some form of a development plan. And at the end of the day, if cities are not putting those kind of plans forward, then especially given the entire smart city sort of campaign that the government has been taking forward, and perhaps a lack of response or a planned response in a sense would have actually led to them then being left out of the entire race as well. So
In the panel, you spoke about self-financing. If you could tell us more about it.
self-financing is a really, really important concept that needs to come out right now. I think when we're talking about infrastructure development in greenfield projects that may be coming up, or new cities that are coming up in India, or brownfield projects in existing cities. And the reason is because infrastructure, considering we want to include elements like climate resilience, for example, is going to be extremely expensive. And given the fact that the government is only, or the central government rather, is only making 500 crore available, for cities, and then the state backs that up with another 500 crore. 1,000 crore is not going to get that kind of infrastructure going. And given the threat of climate change and pollution and all these other things that don't make our cities that livable, and the fact that we do need to take urgent action, the money has to come from somewhere. So the radical idea that was being presented today, because Businessworld did turn around to me and say, present a radical idea. The radical idea is that if we're going to get high technology ideas out there, say for example, a solar road, basically a road made up of solar panels, how is it that we're going to finance something like that? The best thing about a solar roadway is that it generates electricity. Now that is a commodity that can actually be sold to the discom, for example, where the discom buys it at an agreed price or a PPA. And against that, of course, financing can be raised from private banks and public banks as well. So the idea of making these high value assets, as in the infrastructure that we have, that not only pay for themselves but continue paying or generating revenue for municipalities and discoms in the long run, is an idea that must be embedded right now while we are still in the very design phase of smart city development in India. So, yeah.
Your thoughts as to the involvement of Yes Bank in the creation of smart cities in India?
So Yes Bank has been a player generally in the sustainable sort of space and sustainable technology space. Also, when it comes to real estate development, Yes Bank has been one of the early supporters of smaller smart cities springing up all over the country. So there is an obvious interest, of course, when we start talking about smart cities and the fact that there would be a huge technology integration in that. Well, we of course look at it from like any other bank's perspective, which is where is the money going to come from for this, and the fact that there is capital available, but the fact that there aren't that many credit-worthy projects available, or that there aren't that many credit-worthy municipalities out there to whom we could actually lend money to, creates a problem, which is why we've been devoting a lot of time and energy into, at the end of the day, researching this particular area. Smart cities has been talked about left, right, and center, but for a bank, it actually comes down to how is it that we address the risk that is associated with the kind of money that will be deployed, for this entire development. So this is one of the core reasons why Yes Bank is getting very involved from the very, very early stages. And I'd just like to reiterate that, to understand these issues in a lot more detail, the bank actually set up the Yes Institute, which is what I'm a part of, about 1 year ago, where smart urbanization is one of the core focus areas, where we are looking at interesting issues like, urban mobility, smart urban design, and how is it that these issues can actually interlink to come up with a proper plan, which is more long-term and which is actually sustainable from social and environmental points of views as well. So,
Mr. Sukh, you spoke about the risk factor involved. If you could name one or two of it?
I think, okay, when we stick to infrastructure development only in a city scenario, we have had examples in the past in India, without naming any names, of certain projects being taken up in PPP mode, and where 30-year long concessions have been given to private developers to come in to set up that infrastructure. And what's happened is that within just a couple of years, that entire deal has actually failed, and the money that was actually put on the table, which was raised from private sector banks or public sector banks, actually ended up being unfeasible, and those became NPAs or non-performing assets, something that banks really want to control at their end, because at the end of the day it gives an indication of how is it that they do assessments of various credit decisions that they make. So that's why it's really important once again to really understand the underlying risks of projects, especially when it comes to PPP related projects as well. There has been a lot of talk today of institutional reform, of ensuring that these PPP models are sacrosanct, that if a commitment has been made for a certain amount of time, that the government will stick to it irrespective of whatever political party or political forces are in play at the time. That is absolutely key to smart city and generally infrastructure development in our country. Yeah.
Anything else that you would like to add, which was missed out in the panel?
Yeah, I think I was talking a bit too much about personal mobility and, of course, for pedestrianism as well. I think what I really missed out was cycling infrastructure as well in our cities. And I take an example of London right now, which is actually as in the government, the London government is actually taking a decision as to whether they should put in place elevated cycle superhighways, connecting east to west of the city, north to south of the city, and in line with what Mr. Das was talking about, the whole verticalization of interconnected infrastructure is very, very important. So cycling infrastructure in our country, which I feel is independent of the roads for where the cars are, is extremely important. The fact that they'll have their own dedicated pathways is a very, very interesting idea. I myself am a keen cycler. I would try and take my cycle then, as long as it's not too great a distance, because our climate perhaps doesn't allow it to happen. But once again, let's look at the self-financing aspect of elevated superhighways for cyclists. There's no reason why you can't put solar panels on the top to actually provide the shade for the cyclist to actually get from A to B, but at the same time generate that electricity that can become a revenue creator for that infrastructure that's been put in place. So I'm going to underpin everything that I'm saying with self-financing. Infrastructure must be self-financing, and there is technology available to do it, and India must become the hub for that technology and actually innovating that kind of technology as well. Why is it that these technologies or these models are actually being created outside of India? Solar panels are not rocket science. They exist right now in India. So how is it that we can create a sort of innovative ecosystem as well for entrepreneurs in India to try out these ideas in a pilot mode in our cities? Can our smart cities or cities that are vying for that smart city status start providing that ecosystem for entrepreneurs to start testing? At least when you start testing, it sparks the imagination. More ideas may come out. Are we an ideas country right now when it comes to smart city development? Yes, we are. There's lots of discussions taking place. But at the same time, where are the tech entrepreneurs? The guys and girls from India who have actually been coming out with these ideas and trying to implement them. That really also does need to be thought about. So moving away slightly from, urban mobility and infrastructure, where is the ecosystem for entrepreneurs to actually innovate these ideas and test them? And can our cities provide that for them, and can that give them the competitive edge when it comes to smart city development? Must also be thought of.